Hey friends, Ken here, your Thrifty Apprentice, and welcome to the very first creation video in Thrifty Pastel Month 2024, where we will be reaching off into our wonderful bag of pastel choices and choosing something to go along with our weekly prompt, which is fluffy. So, in deciding how to put today's video together, I decided the first pastel type I would tackle would be oil pastels, and I wanted to take the first part of the video in order to answer what I think are the four most asked questions to me about oil pastels. Now, I will preface this with I am no oil pastel expert. I am only sharing with you what I have come to know throughout my learning journey and experience with using oil pastels. So let's jump into it so we can get to creating. Question number one: what is an oil pastel? An oil pastel is a painting medium that consists of a powder pigment mixed with a binder mixture of non-drying oil and wax. Now, because of the binder, they differ from the traditional chalk pastels, which typically use a gum or methyl cellulose as its binder. Now, when compared to the wax crayon, they differ because crayons are made with no oil. Now, the surface of oil pastel paintings will appear much less chalky than that of its counterpart, which is the chalk pastel. And of course, it won't have as much of a waxy appearance as its wax-based counterpart. Now, with that said, oil pastels are much more difficult to protect, mainly because they truly never dry. Question number two. Well, how do I use oil pastels? They can be applied directly to paper in dry form. Now, once you apply the oil pastel to the paper, they can be moved around with a brush, an oil brush, or an all media brush that has been dipped into some type of solvent. Those solvents may be a spirit, like this is Gamsol odorless mineral spirit. It may be something like a linseed oil, like this artisan linseed oil by Winsor and Newton. It may be something like turpentine, which I do not have here in my studio, or it may actually be another type of vegetable oil. Now, however, those not looking to use an oil or a spirit can manipulate the pigment with something like a cotton swab. You can even use things like blending stumps if you have them from drawing. You can use regular old tissue or napkin paper, or you can use what is my favorite, the good old fingers. Now, this is one of the main reasons they are considered a fast medium. Question number three: what type of surface do you use them on? The surface you choose plays a huge part in the final outcome of an oil pastel painting, friends. Now, paper is the normal surface you see them used on, although they can be used on things like wood, metal, masonite, which is sometimes called headboard, canvas, glass. Many companies actually make papers that are specifically for pastels, and those that oil pastels will work wonderfully on. Now here I have just a few paper types because I don't tend to use oil pastels on any other substrate other than paper. And these paper types are going to range from really smooth up to really rough. And depending on the texture of the paper will depend on some of the different techniques that you're able to pull off. One thing that I will say I wish I had have known as a beginner is that when it comes to your harder, more student grade, scholastic grade pastels that are not going to be soft, that are not going to give you a lot of pigment in one pass, more medium to rough grain papers tend to work better with those because it'll help pull the pigment on off, versus super soft pastels. which I tend to like more on, say, a smoother paper or more medium grain paper, not unless I'm using it as the second or third layer to composition that I'm doing. And I've already used a harder pastel as the underpainting. So let's just take a look here. And this is not me promoting any brand versus just showing you the different types of paper that I may use for any given project. Starting here with the one that is super economical, but again, not the brand. It doesn't really matter. But this is a mixed media paper. It's 120 pounds. It of course has multimedia purposes about it. It's rather smooth, has just a little tooth to it, almost puts you in mind of a hot press watercolor paper. I find this surface to be the most universal when it comes to oil pastel. That's been in my experience. I do know some people actually like pastel paper. Let's take a look at that. Now, as I said earlier, companies do make papers that are specifically for pastel use. This one is, let's see, 80 pounds, and it has much more of a tooth than the original mixed media paper that I showed you. Now, this one is specifically targets pastels, including oil pastels, and I have done, I think I've done, it may be one in here. It works decently for oil pastels. I don't have any issues with it at all. So, another type paper that I tend to use. Now, this is another targeted pastel paper. This one is actually of professional quality. So just like your art medium supplies, your papers can come in different grades as well. Whereas with the first two we looked at, this is more of a student grade, even possibly scholastic targeted market. The next two papers that we're going to look at are more along the artist professional realm. This is the Mungio professional pastel paper. Not that it has to be Mungio, just saying that these papers are specifically made and sized for use with pastels, graphite, charcoal, and pencil. It's 98 pounds. It has a really beautiful tooth and texture to it. Um, just it's kind of hard to describe. You would have to really rub your hands across it. And you can get them in different shades to help with mid-tones when you're creating, all the way up to black. And then, of course, every now and then I paint on a paper like this, which is actually a sanded pastel paper. This is a Premier premium paper. It has almost a sand texture surface. You can even hear it scratching as I try to pull it out. But if you could rub your hand across here, you would swear that this was sandpaper that you could use to kind of file something down with. It is a super rough, heavy grained textured paper, and depending on your blending type, you may not take too kindly to that. And we're going to talk about that probably a little bit more in the first upcoming live, as when we touch on the oil pastel section. So there, my friends, are some paper types that I use whenever I am working with oil pastels. Now, final question number 4: what grades do they come in? Well, my friends, like most mediums, they come in a number of grades, ranging from scholastic to student up to professional grade. So let's start with scholastic. Now, scholastic grade is the lowest grade. Generally, it's going to be the hardest of the oil pastels, and it has the less vibrancy than the higher grades do. Normally, we see these for school children or new users, and companies typically target the beginner market with fairly inexpensive prices. This particular one is just, your regular hard wax based pastel. And the truth of the matter is, it'll come in many different brandings. Um, Crayola is a really good and well-known school brand here in the States. Crazy Art, Createology, um, even Royal and Lang Nickel, as far as the scholastic targeted market goes, is pretty well known. So a step up from your scholastic is going to, of course, be your student grade. Now, a student grade is meant for students, or art students, should I say, and are softer and more vibrant than your scholastic grade will be. So, this one is sort of like in between. They're a little bit softer than like your average school grade oil pastel will be. It is going to give you much more of a pigment payoff, be much smoother on the paper, easier to pull off the different types of techniques you may want to pull off. And this particular brand is a really affordable. Again, it's kind of a bridge to me between scholastic and student, but it would fall into the student grade. And of course, the step up from that would be professional. Now, professional grade is the highest grade of oil pastel and are the softest and most vibrant, and of course the most expensive. So yes, my friends, when it comes to oil pastels and their quality, the more professional leaning pastels are going to be really soft and really bright with vibrant pigment that blend and layer easily. The harder pastels that you may happen to be used to are considered the lower grade pastels. Now, as to what you are going to like, it's going to totally depend on you. We are all different people. We all have different tastes, and we're going to all like different things. As for me in my house, I am a fan of the more artist grade student, of the more artist, student, professional leaning oil pastels that are really soft, that are really creamy, that really blend and spread really smoothly, that allow me, excuse me, to layer with no issues, that allow me to scrape back without any issues. And as far as the more economical quality pastels are concerned, the ones that are harder, the ones that might not have such a huge pigment load payoff, the ones that might not be as vibrant, you might not be able to blend them down as smoothly as, say, a super soft pastel would. Those are the ones that I typically use to do maybe the underpainting to an oil pastel, if it gets around to that. For the most part, I just go for my super soft pastels because I know they're going to get the job done right out the gate. And they work so wonderfully in mixed media aspects, like using them with colored pencils. Now, here I have probably my favorite oil pastels that I have in the studio now. And it really wouldn't matter to me what brand was on them. What matters to me is the quality of them. Now, this is considered a premium extra soft oil pastel with vibrant hues. And the advertisement is not overstating. This product is exactly what it says. It is extra soft and it is extremely vibrant. I have used these in some paintings or illustrations, and I've been thoroughly pleased with just how creamy they are. Sometimes so creamy that you will need to use something a little bit stiffer up under it in order to continue to layer. But those are techniques that we'll talk about in an actual technique section. So that, my friends, is a look at the different grades that oil pastels come in. So now that we've scratched the surface a little bit on oil pastels and pulled back the curtain just a tad on what they may be and the many ways you may be able to use them, let's jump into a creation centered around our weekly prompt, which is fluffy. So I'm going to create an ocean scene for you guys with some fluffy clouds. You feel free to go in whatever direction you may want to with this prompt, or if you want to choose something completely different, just grab your pastels and paint. And don't worry, friends, we will dive a little bit more into oil pastels as the month go on. I do want to try to give it to you in small doses at a time. So we will look at different techniques, not only with oil pastels, but other type of pastels as well. So let's jump into this. So, as we get started here, I want to start out with a simple supply list of what I'm using. This isn't to say you need to use these exact products, but instead meant to give you an idea of what you might be able to use that is rather inexpensive. For paper, I'm using 120-pound mixed media paper with a slight tooth. For pastels, I'm using extra soft oil pastels. I picked them because they are soft and I know they will allow me to layer and blend well. Lastly, I'm using a Prismacolor black color pencil. Here again, you can use any opaque black pencil or even pastel that you may have. The scene I want to paint with you is pretty easy and beginner friendly. As this is the very first paint along of Thrifty Pastel Month, I wanted to keep it to simple techniques. The idea is to give experienced oil pastel users something to warm up to, but give novice something that would challenge them just enough to keep them from being bored. Well, hopefully. With that said, I settled on a small seascape scene on a relatively small working area. My paper size is only 5 by 7 and I have taped off about a fourth of an inch on each side. Normally, with stick media that takes a long time to work with, I work smaller than I would if I was using something water soluble. The idea is to make sure I don't bite off more than I can chew at one time, and on the flip side, help keep me from getting bored working on one project so long. I also chose a silhouette. Now, if you've been following me for a while, then you already know my philosophy about this. Silhouette paintings are a wonderful way for you to take on a new medium or test a new product in order to get your feet wet with using it. I have found that swatching your products alongside completing a silhouette painting as your first project with that product helps with a better understanding of how the product or medium might work before tackling more complicated compositions with them. One piece of advice that I like to give anyone who tells me they are just beginning with oil pastels is that all pastels are not equal. As you heard me previously say in the video, they can range from harder low vibrancy pastels to super soft, super vibrant pastels. Then you have to consider all the ones that fall in between. Now, my advice in this area, based on my experience only, is that starting with a softer student grade oil pastel would be ideal. This will give one the chance to test what a better quality pastel will be like, all while keeping you from spending a huge amount of money on products before you are sure it is something you will like and want to continue using. All mediums are not for everyone, and that's perfectly okay, for there is something for all of us. Now, you will notice that I limited my color selection. This was done for a couple of reasons. First, as I always try to stress, limiting your color palette will help keep harmony within your composition. Secondly, working with the same color family will help further train the eye in sighting the difference in values when it comes to your compositions. For the colors, I used a sky blue as my lightest blue, an ultramarine as my mid-tone, black is the darkest value, and white, of course, is the lightest overall value. I would definitely suggest a opaque black and white pencil when using oil pastels. You will be amazed at the value they add. The two main techniques I used in this composition were blending and scraping. For the blending, the task was made a lot easier by the quality of the pastel. The amount of creaminess the pastels have allowed them to spread across the paper pretty easily, filling the tooth. However, the drawback to super softness is that if you aren't careful, you can feel the tooth of the paper too fast. This makes it difficult to layer more pastel onto your previous layers. Now, I've heard of many beginners running into this problem, wondering why they can no longer add product to their paper. It is in the prevention of situations like this that I believe the harder, more student-grade pastels are actually super helpful. You can use the harder pastels as your first layer since they do not blend as well as their softer counterpart. Then you can come back in with your softer pastel for layering and assistance with blending the harder pastels you first put down. Like most art creation projects, you may experience going through a ugly phase with oil pastels. I always encourage people to not give up, but to just keep pushing through. It's the combination of the layers and the details that help pull an oil composition together, in my opinion. As far as blending goes, you will see that I like to use more than one blending technique. The main one I use is my finger. I find that my finger spreads the pastels the best. That may not be the case for all, and one should keep in mind that it is probably the messiest of all the blending techniques. I also like to use blending stumps for precision. It not only helps to blend the larger area, but it is an amazing tool for getting into small corners and for detail work. The last thing I want to touch on in this time lapse is the addition of other mediums to your oil pastel work to help. I am mainly talking about colored pencils. I have found that colored pencils are incredible with pastels. With both mediums being more opaque than transparent, they work super well together. Colored pencils seem to layer really well on oil pastels, allowing the addition of crisp detailing that may not normally be able to be achieved with just the pastel alone due to its size and your provided space. Now, in this composition, my black colored pencil was this painting's best friend. It helped make easy work of the details that may have otherwise not stood out had I tried doing it with just the pastels. The fact of the matter is, I would never be able to cover everything about oil pastels in just one video. Don't worry though. If you are a channel regular, then you will be hearing more about oil pastels and other types throughout this entire month, alongside all the other art creations that we do. Won't just be putting everything on oil pastels this month, I promise. To put some of your minds at ease, don't you worry. However, every Sunday video release will, and we will touch on it here and there in our live sessions during the month. So don't worry if your questions were not answered in the things presented in this video. You can always leave your questions in the comment section and I will go out of my way to get it answered. Or you can simply join along in one of our regular Monday morning lives to ask your question to not only me, but to other artists who may have experience in the pastel realm as well. And there, friends, we have a finished composition for today. Now, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. As I said earlier, there's no way for me to cover everything about oil pastels in one video. We will be continuing to look at them throughout the month. We will be touching on them here and there in some of our Monday lives. And I will reiterate that every video dropped this month won't be about oil pastels. So for all of my other viewers who are interested in all the other mediums, don't worry, we're not giving up on them at all. I just wanted to jump on real quick behind the demo and just kind of show you guys what I used. Now, I'm going to try to stay away from just making too many suggestions as to what I feel a person should have, but I am going to kind of give some inexpensive options that you may want to consider. Now, what I used for this one was Canson graduate mixed media paper. This particular, I am being brand specific now. Earlier in the video, I was just talking about types. Here, I'm being brand specific as to which brands I've encountered work well for me and do not cost a lot of money. Canson graduate mixed media paper is pretty inexpensive, and you can actually find it in Walmart. I found it in most of the local Walmarts around here. It costs about $3, $4, maybe $5 a pad. You're going to get 20 sheets, 12, 9 by 12. And I have used oil pastel colored pencils, alcohol markers, watercolors, gouache, several different mediums on here, and it tends to hold up and work okay for what it is. The pastels I used were the Montmartre Premium Extra Soft Oil Pastels. Now, this is my favorite set of pastels here in the studio so far. No, they don't have a professional branding on them, but I do believe that the quality of them are pretty amazing. and I've tried several dozen brands of oil pastels. They are relatively inexpensive. They're super bright with the pigment payoff, and you get 120 pastels in one go. So definitely something you may want to consider. I used a Prismacolor black pencil, but again, repeating what was said earlier, you don't necessarily need Prismacolor. You just need an opaque, black pencil. I definitely want you guys to give this a try. No traceable needed. Very straightforward. A sky, water, couple of rocks, palm tree images, and some birds. Kept my fluffy clouds in the sky very noticeable. That way I was sure I was adhering to today's prompt, but I did kind of want to take it further and try some other things. Now, it's not perfect by any means, but I do believe it turned out okay and well enough for me to kind of convey the things I wanted to convey in this video. So friends, jump in the comment section. Let me know what you think. I would really love to know. Is this your first time looking at pastels? Is your first time trying oil pastels? What has been your experience? Did this video help in or relate any information that you found helpful? I would really, really love to know. If you're new are returning and haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscription button and notification bell so that you know when we go live and when we upload, so you don't miss content like this. Now, video description is going to have all of the relevant links. And of course, I want you guys to sprinkle love and definitely give the video a thumbs up. It's going to help push it in front of other amazing viewers like yourself. And if you care to share, because sharing is caring, and it's going to help just as much as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you guys here tomorrow, Monday morning at 11 a.m. for our regularly scheduled live. And in the meantime, just keep creating.